What if Darth Maul trained Reva? In the canon Star Wars story, Reva is picked up by the Inquisitorius following Order 66, as she trains to become a powerful Jedi killer. On an old video, though, Benjamin wondered what if instead, Reva had been an apprentice to Maul, along with heir to his criminal empire. That's the concept that we'll be exploring today. So, without further ado, let's get started. Our story begins following the events of Order 66 on Coruscant. Reva, after managing to escape Anakin's massacre of the Jedi Temple by pretending to be dead, flees to the desolate streets of the Undercity. In our timeline, the only reason that Anakin couldn't sense her presence is due to the fact that he's so embroiled in hatred that he's focused on executing the rest of his mission, and he misses that Reva, an insignificant youngling, is still alive. His hatred blinds him. Anyway, to continue Reva's story, she soon discovers that she's not safe in the lower levels. Gangs run rampant. Crime rules the streets. People live in fear. Reva attempts to hide, concealing herself from the gang members and enforcers that ran rampant in the lower levels of the city. However, she can't stay hidden for long. Eventually, she becomes hungry, thirsty, and is on the verge of death. Some members of the Black Sun find her wandering the streets, and they see an opportunity. They tell her that they'll nurse her back to full health, and that they'll be like a new family for her if she comes and joins their organization. Reva, not seeing much of an alternative at the time, agrees, and she ends up going with these enforcers back to their headquarters on Coruscant. They do end up helping her regain her strength, and she initially hides her force sensitivity to them. She doesn't know how they'll react, and it's possible that they would report her existence to the Empire if they knew that she had once been a Jedi. How does this change Reva's fate, and how does it impact the greater destiny of the galaxy? Let's keep going and find out. Reva shows incredible prowess working as a Black Sun enforcer. While she doesn't reveal her force sensitivity, she does prove to pick up quickly on their tricks. She's an adept combatant, and she learns how to fend for herself against some of the other members of the Black Sun who do not appreciate her presence. She also gains that sense of ambition that we see her having in Kenobi. She's not one to be messed with, and she also becomes one of the Black Sun's most brutal enforcers. Part of this is because she has so much pent-up anger from her days as a youngling. She wants to see Vader pay for his actions, but she has nowhere other than her work to direct her rage. She also climbs the ranks of the Black Sun quickly, and eventually she works her way up to becoming one of the Vigo of the Black Sun's personal guard and enforcer. This Vigo is stationed on Coruscant. When people have really angered the Black Sun on the galactic capital, in his territory, that's when Reva gets sent out. Prince Xizor ends up taking the mantle of leadership for the Black Sun. His influence in the galaxy is unparalleled, save for some people such as the Emperor and the secret leader of the Shadow Collective, Maul. One day, Xizor visits his Vigo on Coruscant, curious to see how some of the more gritty operations are proceeding outside of his massive palace in the southern underground region of the same planet. He is greeted by Reva, with whom he is incredibly impressed. She's tough, hard, composed, yet full of anger. Exactly what Xizor looks for in his Black Sun enforcers. While on the tour of the Vigo's operation, Xizor continues to be impressed by Reva, and at the end, he requests that the Vigo allow her to return with him to his own residence to work with him personally. After some grumbling, the Vigo obliges, and Reva ends up working with Xizor, still trying to hide her force abilities. Despite being well liked by the Black Sun, she is uncertain how they would react to an ex-Jedi in their midst. One thing is for sure though, Reva is now in this life for good. She'd been raised by these guys, and she would always be indebted to them. She also notices that in some sense, she enjoys the work. It's almost an outlet for her. Training, enforcing, protecting powerful people, she feels as though she's putting her skills to work. Beyond that, working up through the ranks of the Black Sun could definitely help her possibly have the opportunity to meet Lord Vader himself, the man who had placed her in this predicament. She still feels an incredible hatred towards Vader for how he had slaughtered her former friends and forced her to witness his carnage. One day, she would meet the man herself. Then, they would truly see who's more powerful. As Reva continues to do her job well, her reputation spreads. She makes an appearance at one of the covert meetings between the heads of various Shadow Collective factions, which Xizor hosts in his affluent mansion, and catches the eye of the true leader pulling the strings of the criminal underworld. Maul, who organizes this meeting to speak about how they can continue to work together in undermining the relatively new galactic empire, can sense something different about Reva. Because she is still concealing her force powers, he isn't certain. However, he can feel that she has a presence about her, which the fellow leaders and enforcers do not. When Xizor brags to the collective about Reva's efficiency, Maul strokes his chin and mumbles to himself. Following the meeting, Maul requests that Reva take a stroll with him through some of the cavernous halls of Xizor's palace, which she obliges. Xizor has a small contingent of bodyguards take her place when she leaves. Maul, on his promenade through the palace, tells Reva that he can sense something is a little bit different about her. Initially, Reva's stomach drops. Was this man an Inquisitor? Had the Empire somehow managed to infiltrate the Shadow Collective? Was she being hunted? Maul smirks, saying that he can sense Reva's apprehension, but that he also hated the Sith. He tells her that they had cast him aside at a young age, and that they had killed his brother, and that the man who now sat on the Imperial throne, Palpatine, was responsible. Reva is still unconvinced, but Maul says that he can prove it to her. Maul tells Reva that if she is willing, he could help her unlock new mysteries of the Force, and that he could show her power beyond her wildest dreams. Once again, Maul emphasizes that there is no point in hiding who she is from him, because he's already sensed something about her that stands out. Reva, not seeing much of an alternative, and not wanting to upset this strange but powerful man, agrees. When the pair return to the main conference room of Xizor's palace, Maul calmly announces that Reva will now be leaving with him on Shadow Collective business. Initially, Xizor fights against this, telling Maul that Reva was one of the Black Sun's most important members. Maul reminds him that they have a greater goal, and that sometimes sacrifices must be made for the greater agenda of the Shadow Collective. One of those sacrifices for him would have to be Reva. Xizor reaches for a blaster in his pocket, but before his hand gets to it, Maul reaches out with the Force, constricting a tight hand against Xizor's throat. The bodyguards also attempt to draw their weapons, but Maul uses his other hand to push them backwards into a nearby wall. Maul asks again if Xizor is willing to allow Reva the privilege to accompany him, and Xizor nods slowly. Maul drops the Phaline, and he announces that he will now be departing Coruscant. Maul turns, his black robes flourishing, and he gestures for Reva to join him. She quickly thanks the Black Sun for everything that they had done for her, and for the opportunities that they had given her. She tells Xizor that she will make him proud before turning and catching up with Maul on his way out the door. When Maul takes Reva to his old, repurposed Mandalorian Gauntlet starfighter, she is extremely intrigued. Not too many people off of Mandalore use those ships. She asks Maul from where he procured this ship, and Maul smiles, telling her that it's a long story from his past. However, he then pushes his robe to one side, revealing the hilts of the darksaber. Reva's confused, asking him if that's a lightsaber. Once again, Maul smirks, telling her that it's something along those lines. The pair board his ship, and Maul tells Reva that he's based on Dathomir. Reva remembers some of her old Jedi history classes, and she asks him if that's where the witches were. Maul looks straight forward, his lips set in a thin line, before telling Reva that at one point in time, that's where they'd been. Now, however, he was alone with the ghosts of his sisters long past. He lets Reva know that his sisters in the Force had also been slaughtered by the order of the man who now sits in power, and that Darth Sidious was to blame for the decline of the Night Sister tribes. Hearing Maul's story and seeing his rage towards the powers that be in the galaxy move Reva, and she ends up telling him her story. She lets him know that for years she'd been repressing her Force powers for fear that the Black Sun would hand her over to the Empire. Maul smiles, and he tells her not to worry about that anymore. Soon, the entire galaxy would see their power, and they would rule the underworld with an iron fist. Maul tells Reva that once they reach Dathomir, her training would begin. When the two arrive, Maul shows Reva to his lair. There, she sees many of the pieces of memorabilia and art that Maul has stored around the cave, and she's intrigued. Much of it has to do with Mandalore, and some of it is simply assorted junk or treasure. She can sense the power emanating from many of the objects as though they had an ancient connection to the Force, which they probably did. Maul's hideout is much more organized than it is when Sabine stumbles across it during Rebels, and he has a contingent of droid guards that are protecting his fortress of the same variety that can be seen helping him out when he takes the Ghost Crew hostage in order to get to Ezra during the show. Maul begins to show Reva the ancient secrets of the Night Sisters, and he also shows her how to unlock the dark side of the Force, just as the Sith are able to do. Her training starts, and Reva realizes that Maul is a difficult master. He's unpredictable, tough on her, and becomes frustrated easily due to his broken mind. However, at the same time, he has much wisdom to give the young woman, and she accepts it eagerly. After many months of rigorous training in lightsaber dueling with Maul, Reva learns to unlock all of the abilities that she had been hiding for years. Her pent-up anger, natural ability with the Force, and eagerness to get the job done allow for Reva to progress incredibly quickly in her training. During this time, Reva also studies Maul as he deals with the various syndicate leaders, continuing to determine the agenda for the Shadow Collective from his Palace of Darkness on Dathomir. Sometimes, Maul sends Reva on solo missions as an enforcer, much like Sidious had done with him as an assassin. However, unlike Sidious, Maul ensures that she would be able to learn from every experience, and he takes the time to debrief her and teach her after every one of these excursions. With Maul at the helm and Reva working alongside him, the Shadow Collective continues to thrive. The Black Order exploits the people of the galaxy, moving into the cracks which the Empire has let develop in their ever-expanding galactic hegemony. Pykes, Black Sun, Hutts, and Crimson Dawn all coordinate covertly under the direction of Maul, and with the assistance of Reva, ensuring that each of them have their own monopolies, territory, and areas of expertise. As smaller syndicates develop, the Shadow Collective is quick to either crush them or invite them into the fold, securing their own monopoly on the criminal underworld. Many Imperial officers in the Outer Rim are in their pockets, allowing their operations to continue within their space, so long as they end up with a sizable paycheck for compensation. While the Empire attempts to crack down on this corruption, it is difficult. There are too many officers that have been bribed, blackmailed, or coerced into permitting Shadow Collective operations to catch them all, especially some of the ones in the high command on Coruscant. Maul and Reva continue to train, and their secret organization continues to be a thorn in the Empire's side. While many of the Imperial officers see no connection between these syndicates, assuming that they're still each squabbling for some semblance of power within the power vacuum left at the end of the Republic, there's one admiral who starts to think differently than the rest. He starts to see similarities between many of the strategies of the power consolidation from the criminal factions. He also begins to believe that these warlords are actively working under one hand, and that together they are attempting to undermine the authority of the Empire. This military leader is Grand Admiral Thrawn. Thrawn brings up his concerns with some of his colleagues, who initially dismiss them. However, after listening to his reasoning and watching the various pieces of footage that they have of raids and attacks from across the galaxy, some of them begin to see his point. Thrawn also informs him that he has studied artwork from the Pykes, Phaelin, and Hutts, and he doesn't see any of them following their normal patterns or culture. Someone was behind the scenes, clearly manipulating the direction of the criminal underworld, and Thrawn believes that soon this mastermind will be revealed. He just needed to set a trap. But how? Thrawn manages to convince some in positions of Imperial leadership of his position. However, there are those like Tarkin who enjoy playing politics more than they look out for the security of the Empire. Tarkin tells Thrawn that there is no concrete evidence of his theory, and that the Empire had their interests focused on other projects at the moment. In a similar fashion to how he rejects Thrawn's proposals to fund the TIE Defender program in favor of the Death Star, he also shuts down Thrawn's attempts to gain more Imperial resources to investigate this threat. Thrawn is frustrated, but he retains composure. After this meeting, Thrawn is approached by Yularen, who says that he would be happy to dedicate further ISB resources to investigating Thrawn's theory. After all, when had the Chiss been wrong in the past? Thrawn thanks his colleague, and he is prepared to challenge Imperial High Command on this issue. Thrawn, after studying the military coordination of these cartels, believes that a massive strike on one will result in the others panicking, which would, in his mind, either break the other syndicates apart for fear that they would also be raided, or that they would end up banding together stronger and that their shadowy leader would be forced out of hiding. Either one would suit Thrawn's purposes, and he believes that taking the 7th Fleet to intimidate the syndicate that he sees as the least threatening of the bunch would be prudent. Using intelligence granted from Colonel Yularen, Thrawn finds that there is a significant amount of evidence to suggest that the Pykes were based on Obadiah, and that they had less of a defense fleet than the rest of the major syndicates, although it was still substantial. Beyond that, according to insiders, Pykes seem to always be having leadership tensions and disloyalty running rampant within their ranks. So, Thrawn, against Imperial High Command's direction, decides to take a gamble. Using the 7th Fleet and going around the rampant bureaucracy and corruption that plagued Imperial High Command, Thrawn jumps to Obadiah, ready to crush the Pykes and figure out what was going on once and for all. When Thrawn's fleet arrives on Obadiah after a long traverse through the Kessel Run, he is suitably prepared for whatever is coming his way. Initially, he hails the Pykes and he tells them that there is a crackdown on their illegal spice dealing in this sector. The Pike leader, Marge Krim, informs the Imperials that they had no business here, and that all of their business was completely legitimate. Thrawn replies by telling him that Imperial intelligence states otherwise, and he gives them a chance to surrender before he puts his foot down. Naturally, the Pikes do not. They end up sending swarms of starfighters and transport frigates up into the atmosphere in an attempt to subdue Imperial forces. This is no use against Thrawn, who has a significantly larger number of ships than the Pykes do, and who also has the element of surprise. And he ends up quickly disposing of all the Pike attackers. Then, mercilessly, he orders a small orbital bombardment of the planet, which shatters a significant chunk of the Pike city. Eventually, after Thrawn scrambles his fighters and sends them towards the planet, along with a ground invasion force, Marg surrenders himself to the Empire, and they seize control of the spice operation. Over the next few days, many events take place. Thrawn is blasted by Imperial High Command, and he is even threatened with a court-martial for disobeying the direct orders of Grand Moff. However, the Emperor himself is impressed by Thrawn, and he says that such initiative should be rewarded, not punished. Thrawn avoids punishment, and he receives an official commendation from the office of the Emperor placed on his file. Many officers are furious, especially those who already despise him. However, Thrawn's theory soon appears to be making more sense. Following the arrest of Marg, ISB officers offer the Pike leader a shorter sentence if he provides them with information about the Pikes and other syndicates. Marg remains staunch in his loyalty to the other organizations, knowing that they will likely kill him if he tells the Empire their secrets. The ISB can be very persuasive though. After some, how do I word this in a YouTube-friendly fashion? Mild interrogation, eventually, Marg gives up the secrets of the Shadow Collective to the Security Bureau. When they're finished with him, the ISB interrogators leave him to rot in his cell. Thrawn is immediately informed of this, and he once again pushes that Imperial High Command allow him to act upon this information, this time under official authorization. With solid evidence and with information from important ISB insiders within Xizor's palace on Coruscant, Thrawn is able to make a case for his attack on the Shadow Collective. Those Black Sun insiders have also informed the Empire that the crackdown on the Pykes had definitely shaken many of the other Syndicate leaders, and that they would be traveling to a discrete world in the Outer Rim to discuss their next moves forward. The insiders say that they're scared that the Empire is tracking their holocalls, so they need to be meeting in person to avoid all possible security risks. Begrudgingly, Tarkin authorizes Thrawn to use the 7th Fleet, along with ISB resources, to take this threat head on. Tarkin is more annoyed than anything, and he hopes that this attack on the crime syndicates would purge some of the corrupt Imperials from his circle. When Thrawn hears that the meeting is taking place on Dathomir, he's slightly confused. He knows that there had once been a sect of Force Witches that had lived there, but now there's nothing. Thrawn supposed that it was a discreet place for a criminal mastermind to stay hidden from the rest of the galaxy. In his preparations, Thrawn is approached by Darth Vader himself, who says that he has a particular distaste for these organized criminal establishments, and that he has permission from the Emperor to assist in exterminating them on this mission. Vader believes that together, he and Thrawn could defeat these criminals with one fell swoop, and Thrawn agrees. The two nod at each other, and Vader boards the Chimera with the Chiss leader. Soon, the Shadow Collective would have a massive surprise coming. And soon, a battle for the security of the galaxy would begin. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, following the collapse of the Pike cartel, Maul begins to worry about his grand plan. For years, he's been consolidating power in the shadows, waiting for the perfect time to strike. Now, it seems that the Empire had struck first. Perhaps Maul had been too patient, but he was too late to even consider that possibility. Reva, who has progressed significantly in her training over this period of time, begins to see her master devolve into a poor mental state over this event, but she says nothing. After Maul tells all of the criminal leaders to gather on Dathomir for a meeting, Reva warns Maul that perhaps calling all of them to one planet would be a bad idea, especially since somehow the Empire had already known about the affairs of the Pike Syndicate. Reva informs Maul that he may reveal his position to the Empire, and that he would be placed on a target list for them, which was exactly the type of attention that he didn't want. Maul, however, is blinded by his fear, frustration, and anxiety about the future. Reva goes with his plan, but she's still apprehensive. All of the cartel leaders arrive with significant chunks of their fleet. The Black Sun and Hutts leave many of their ships in orbit as their leaders descend to the surface, and the Crimson Dawn parks Dryden Voss's pleasure yacht in orbit as well. The leaders descend to Dathomir, all slightly creeped out by the environment, but understanding that it was a good location for all of them to meet outside of the watchful eyes of the Empire. Before the meeting starts, Xizor and Reva share a glance, and she nods at him. He returns the nod, respectful but still clearly upset that she had left his service. Alongside Dryden Voss is one of his top lieutenants, Kira. The Hutts are, well, the Hutts, and all of the members of the council that decided to attend are paraded around on their thrones by slaves. Maul invites them all into his palace, and he tells them to get comfortable. Each of them expresses concern about how they fear a similar collapse of their enterprises, exactly like what happened to the Pykes, and they show frustration with the fact that a massive power vacuum had now emerged in the spice running industry. Maul strokes his chin, listening to all of these comments, and he assures them that he has a plan. He tells them that he believes the spice runners of Kijimi are suitable replacements for the Pykes in his collective, and he also says that they still have many Imperials in their pockets. They weren't going anywhere. Immediately after Maul says this, proximity sensors at his palace begin to beep. The Imperial fleet had arrived, and his satellites were tracking them. Maul begins to have a slight breakdown, wondering how in the Force the Imperials had found him here. The other criminal leaders are also flustered, telling Maul that they thought they were safe. Each of them begins to get up and leave, and Maul tells them that they must stay and fight for their cause. Xizor scoffs at Maul, saying that no one had a greater purpose other than maintaining power, something that Maul could no longer guarantee for him. Dryden stays calm, watching the exchange take place. Maul pulls his saber off of his belt, and he ignites it, rushing towards Xizor, telling him that he could either die attempting to escape the Empire, or he could die at the hands of Maul. Xizor laughs, and as Maul is rushing towards him, he begins blasting alongside some of his personal bodyguards. Voss and the Hutts take cover as this firefight erupts, and Reva activates her own saber, which she had built on Dathomir with Maul. While they are distracted by Maul, she force sprints towards the Black Sun enforcers, and she begins cutting them down. She feels some remorse about this, especially since they had helped raise her. Maul, though, understood her better than any of these criminals could. He had trained her, uplifted her, and helped her to become a true warrior of the dark side. Mercilessly, she cuts down Xizor before Maul gets to him, and his eyes fill with surprise and hurt before he dies. Maul then looks around the room, and he asks if anyone else wanted to challenge his authority. The gathered leaders remain quiet, and they agree to help battle the Imperials. Reva is a little bit thrown off by this exchange, and she is slightly saddened by the death of Xizor. However, she acknowledges that it is necessary sometimes to do unsavory things in order to protect the interests of the Shadow Collective and her own personal agenda. The first thing that Thrawn does is order the Interdictor-class starships in his fleet to activate their gravity well generators, stopping the criminals from being able to leave. He then remains patient, eager to see what this ragtag criminal fleet will come up with next. They appear to have no unified command in the skies, and with the Hutts, Black Sun, and Crimson Dawn fleets all acting independently from one another, this makes for a unique challenge for the Grand Admiral. It forces Thrawn to think on his feet, as this was an unorthodox threat. However, using his incredible tactical knowledge and skill, he's able to subdue their disjointed attacks. Due to their lack of unified command, these criminals end up making themselves vulnerable to the swift, organized hand of the 7th Fleet. Thrawn's ties outmaneuver the less seasoned criminal fighter pilots, especially with his covert deployment of an extremely early Defender prototype into the zone to test its battle worthiness. After a nasty naval confrontation, eventually the criminals are disabled in the sky and they are unable to take down the interdictors, leaving them stranded in orbit of Dathomir. Thrawn, seeing this as a victory but still wanting to learn who the mastermind behind all of this is, sends Vader to the surface to lead a ground attack, which the Dark Lord agrees to. He himself took personal satisfaction in dismantling the same criminal organizations that had treated him like property when he was younger. Justice had a funny sense of humor sometimes. Because most of the fighting took place in the skies, and the crime bosses only took a small contingent of warriors to the surface of Dathomir, there isn't much chance for these criminal leaders against an overwhelming Imperial force led by Darth Vader. However, they still do what they can to fortify Maul's palace. Maul also uses Night Sister incantations to bring forth some of the old souls of his dead sisters to aid him in battle, stating that they will be able to take over the bodies of stormtroopers if they helped him. When Vader and his attack force lands, Maul's droids, the crime bosses, and the witches all make an effort to protect Dathomir. Maul ignites his twin sabers and rushes into battle, mowing down Imperial troopers left and right. Reva follows closely behind, killing invaders and watching the souls of the old Night Sisters possess some of the dead bodies that were piling up on their planet. Vader, who remembers the tricks of these witches from the Clone Wars, quickly dispatches of them, sending their souls back into the caves from which they came. Vader quickly dispatches of many of Maul's criminals as well, and their force begins to dwindle. Maul and Reva battle side by side, continuing to wreak havoc on the incoming Imperials. However, when they come face to face with the Dark Lord, each of them freezes in fear. The breathing, the demonic aura, the red saber, it is paralyzing, even for 2 seasoned Force users. Especially Reva, who had felt that presence only once before in the past. Vader recognizes Maul from all of the stories that he had been told. He comments about how he had been the mastermind, and the only one manipulating things in the shadows. Maul then laughs, saying that he knew who Vader truly was, Anakin Skywalker, and that he had seen how Sidious had twisted him, just like he had twisted Maul himself. Maul then extends his hand out to the Dark Lord, saying that they could join forces and take down Sidious, bringing about true justice to the galaxy. Maul looks at Reva, telling him that that wasn't their deal, and that he had promised her the chance to kill Vader, not work with him. Maul shoots her a glance, telling her that she must see the possibilities of having a Sith Lord on their side to help take down Palpatine. Vader then says that enough is enough, and that Anakin Skywalker is dead. He lifts Maul into the air with a powerful force choke. Maul's eyes go wide, and Reva rushes towards Vader, screaming a guttural battle cry. Vader doesn't even look in her direction. He simply puts his other hand out and shoves her backwards with the Force. He looks Maul in the eyes, squeezing tighter. He tells Maul that he's been nothing more than a pest in the eyes of the Emperor for years, and that he means nothing. This little empire that Maul had built was nothing compared to the power that Vader and Sidious wielded. Maul manages to squeak out that they would never win, and that one day someone would avenge the death of his brother for him. Vader finally snaps, cracking Maul's neck before Maul falls to the ground, and Vader remarks that today was another day that had removed a thorn in the Emperor's side. After seeing the death of her master, Reva is enraged. She again charges the Dark Lord, and this time, Vader briefly entertains her. She talks about how he had killed her friends back in the day and how now he would feel her wrath. Vader laughs and says that he doesn't know her, and that he has no clue who she even is. This infuriates Reva more, and Vader continues to entertain her challenge. He clashes sabers with the young woman, deflecting her every blow, keeping his cool. He remarks about how Reva's skill with the blade is immaculate, and says that he knows she would make a good addition to the Empire. all that she had known was crime and the ignorant ways of the Jedi. Vader could show her true freedom, and he could open up new doors for career advancement within the Empire. Reva is too blinded by hatred to even consider this. Vader had taken everything that she had known on 2 occasions now, and now she would make him pay. Once again, Vader finally becomes annoyed. He begins retaliating at Reva, forcing her backwards with his brutally efficient dark side strikes. Eventually, he slices her saber in half, and he offers her one last chance to become an Inquisitor. Reva, being the stubborn person that she is, tells Vader that she'd rather die than work as his slave. She then spits on his boots. Vader says that it's a shame that he had to do this because she had so much potential, but he then stabs her through the chest. Vader stands tall, his cape billowing in the small Dathomirian breeze, and he can almost hear the screams of the Night Sister spirits as the Empire continues to cut down and arrest the remaining criminals. Vader returns to the Chimera after the battle, and he informs Thrawn that the mastermind had been dealt with. He tells Thrawn that it was Maul, somebody who had been in the Clone Wars and a petty criminal ruler that was trying to build some stupid little empire. Thrawn says that it's a shame that Maul had to die, as he would have loved to have learned more about the various syndicates, but that it was a better outcome than nothing at all. After boarding, arresting, and subduing all of the criminals that had participated in this battle, Thrawn decides that it would be prudent to inform Imperial High Command of this development. One of the leaders who still remains unaccounted for is Dryden Voss, whom not even Vader had seen on the surface. Thrawn tells Vader that the crime lord in charge of Crimson Dawn was nowhere to be found on his yacht, and that his associate, Kira, also seemed to be gone. Vader crosses his arms pensively, unable to provide any further details to Thrawn. Thrawn strokes his chin, suspecting that Voss had escaped in a personal shuttle on the other side of the planet, in all of the commotion, far from the interdictors, and that thus he had gone undetected by any of the Imperials. Thrawn admires Voss's intelligence, but also despises the fact that he had taken the cowardly approach. Clearly, Maul had not noticed his departure in the fray of the fight either. Thrawn says that despite Voss's escape, this is still a win for the Empire, as the Shadow Collective had effectively been destroyed. Vader agrees, and they both report the results of their mission back to Grand Moff Tarkin via hologram. Tarkin is impressed, and he expresses that he will relay their successes to the Emperor. Thrawn also tries to squeeze a little bit of self-appreciation into this report, telling Tarkin that the TIE Defender had been a deciding factor in the battle above the planet, which he hopes that the Moff will take into consideration in the future. Tarkin tells Thrawn that it was an interesting development, and that he may have more of a case for increased funding going forward. In the Senate, Thrawn and Vader are heralded as heroes after the Emperor gives a speech about how the military had maintained peace, order, and security by crushing a massive, coordinated criminal operation. The Senate votes to declare the next day a galactic holiday in honor of the takedown, and they also commit to increased military spending going forward. This troubles senators like Mon Mothma, but she remains quiet, waiting for the right time to speak her mind about Palpatine's shenanigans. How do these events impact the conclusion of our story? Let's find out. As the dust settles on the galaxy, the major syndicates are falling apart. Many members of the Hutt Council were arrested and charged, leaving only a few to run their remaining empire. Jabba is one of them, and he consolidates further power within the Hutt cartel, tightening their hold in the Outer Rim. Without Xizor, the Black Sun devolves into a power struggle between the Vigos, and they end up fracturing into multiple enterprises. Dryden, who escaped Dathomir, goes into hiding, biding his time with Kira, waiting for the right time to return. He sees Maul's vision as a legacy worth continuing, and he believes that him and Kira are the two best for the job of leading that charge. However, he would have to let the infighting settle down before he made his grand return. Many smaller gangs and cartels also start to make names for themselves, but they don't have the resources to corrupt the Empire like the Shadow Collective did. So, oftentimes, their operations are shut down by Imperial forces. Vader tells Palpatine that he wishes that Reva and Maul had joined him, as they both would have made powerful assets to the Empire. Palpatine tells Vader that both of them had been hindrances, and that the galaxy was better off without them. He tells Vader to focus on the Inquisitors and to continue pushing the program forward. Vader obliges his master's wishes, and he keeps hunting the remaining Jedi across the galaxy. Thrawn's campaign had momentarily brought more peace to the galaxy. Corrupt Imperials had been weeded out after the capture of Shadow Collective leaders. Some senators had been removed from their positions of power due to their collaboration with these criminals. The people started to gain a more positive view of the Empire, as it seemed like they were actually committed to the preservation of true order in the galaxy, especially in the Outer Rim, something that the Republic had always shied away from. There is still rebel activity, but many citizens prefer the galactic government to what had come before. Affairs seemed to be finally settling down and returning to the Empire's version of normal. There would always be people seeking more power in the shadows, though. Soon, the day would come for a new crime lord to rise and continue the legacies of Maul and Reva. In the words of Obi-Wan Kenobi, hello there! I hope you liked today's What If video. If you enjoyed it, I'd recommend watching last week's video, What If Palpatine Was a Jedi? Let us know what you thought of this video in the comments. Would you like to see a part 2? Have an awesome day, everyone, and as always, I hope that you've gotten your delicious daily dose of Bantha Stew.